From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. This is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior. It's very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Also, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. Andre, it is Wednesday. It has been a very, very, very eventful week, and we expect it to be so with the NFL free agency underway. The Saints are in the news. We're going to get into that in just a minute, but how are you feeling on this Wednesday?
I'm feeling good. You know, like you mentioned, it's a week where you're constantly checking your phone because you never know when the next alert's going to come out. And I even asked you when I came in today, I was like, it's Wednesday, probably around 3 o'clock that we're taping this. I said, am I missing something? Or have the Saints been abnormally quiet for this time of year today? And so far, no big moves.
Well, not today, specifically today,
now,
but over the last since the floodgates opened on Monday at 11 a.m. Central Time, their name has certainly been in the news. The New Orleans Saints have. So obviously, that's the way we're going to go with it today. We could have gone with this a couple different ways with the big picture, but we're not going to bury the lead. We're going to get right into the Saints. Really, if you think about it, it's their biggest signing in the last 2 years. When you talk about the offseason, they made a big splash. It was one of two players they acquired from another team. The other one they acquired via trade, and Devon Godshaw. This one, it's another local product from the Baton Rouge area. They signed Chiefs safety and Dutchtown High School product and Prairieville native Justin Reid to a 3-year, $31 million contract. And, of course, that's where we're going to go with the big picture today.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's one of the biggest defensive signings that the Saints have made in a long time. And the Saints for a while have been looking for a safety to place opposite of Tyrann Mathieu. You know, they tried out Marcus May a few years ago. They drafted Jordan Howden. Last year they tried out Will Harris, and none of those seemed to stick for any really long period of time. But now they're bringing in a player that's really better than all three of those guys, and a player who's got some hardware. A 2-time Super Bowl champion, Ascension Parish's finest, Justin Reid. How are we feeling about the Justin Reid acquisition?
Well, I won't sugarcoat it. I graded this an A. I mean, it was one of those, I wasn't necessarily expecting his name to pop up. I was doing some research once, some names had left, some names came, just kind of resetting the free agent list. And what was funny was right when the news popped, the list was up there, and I ran across, I don't know what publication it was, but it said 5 best free agents available, and number 2 on that list was Justin Reid. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 it's how that kind of lines up sometimes in your head, and all of a sudden you see the name, and then oh wow, I was just thinking about that when obviously the move was made for the Saints to bring in Justin Reid. Like I said, I gave this signing an A, and to those that don't like it, give me a reason why. How could you possibly not? I mean, to me, 3 years, $31 million, it's a fair value. He's 28 years old. To me, this is exactly the type of young veteran, accomplished, competent, versatile, and relatively inexpensive, but not cheap player that you get. You've kind of piecemealed together the last couple of years with this safety, a 6th-round pick or a 5th-round pick with Jordan Howden. Will Harris was a 1-year deal, who I liked, but nonetheless, it was a 1-year deal that you didn't go out saying, oh, I want that guy to be my guy. Marcus May was one they fell a little short at. And look, they've been a little hesitant at that position since they swung for the fences and missed back in 2014 with Jarris Byrd. But to me, you settle in on a nice day 2 value from a guy that's got championship pedigree, was drafted by Houston, then went to Kansas City, replaced Tyrann Mathieu in Kansas City. Now the two will meet up again in New Orleans in the same defensive backfield, and obviously they've got their connection with the Louisiana roots. Their paths crossed. You found this out in 2018. Is that correct?
In Houston.
And Tyrann's lone season with the Texans. So the number one thing that jumps out to me about Justin Reid, and when I see something like this, I'm familiar with his game. I remember him coming out of high school. I remember when it was out of LSU or Stanford to get him. He ended up going to Stanford despite his brother being, one of the best during that run, that early 2010 run, 2010s, I guess you would call it, run that decade at LSU. Cross paths, obviously, with Tyrann Mathieu there again. So there's a lot of connective tissue. But that That's Louisiana. There's always going to be a lot of connective tissue. So, but when you go back and kind of refresh yourself on his game, I was even more, not surprised, but I was even more impressed. I mean, I liked it even more. And the number one thing that jumps out when you go back and you watch Justin Reid is open field tackling. Just do yourself a favor. If you're watching us on YouTube, you're very familiar with YouTube. So go to YouTube. If you want to check it out, type in Justin Reid's highlights, and make note of how many times in that highlight reel, I'm sure there's a couple of different versions, but how many times in that highlight reel where there is a shorter completion to a tight end, a back, a receiver in the flat, so it was within 0 to 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, and you just freeze the frame, and there's no defender in sight. There's no defender in the picture. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Reid comes flying in with a strong, sure, explosive tackle to stop that pass catcher for a very, very, very minimal gain or no gain at all. He is a very active player. He was in a very unique scheme with Kansas City. Steve Spagnuolo was very matchup-oriented, as everyone has to be. Brandon Staley, by all accounts, is the same way. I just went back and watched the AFC Championship game. I just wanted to get a pre-snap look at where he's lined up. In that game, he probably played more deep half than he had played all season, because they were game planning for more of those over routes from one side of the field to the other, and he was playing that opposite field safety where he was taking kind of the over route coming to him. Matter of fact, he almost got an interception on the first play of the game in that game. He played too high. He played single high. He played a lot of box. He played a lot of dime linebacker when they went to three safety look, that heavy nickel look. Call it dime, call it heavy nickel, whatever you want to call it. He was a robber at times where he started high, came back down. But to me, this is a guy that offers versatility. I would love to see what his favorite coverage is, or what he kind of grades out the best at. I just didn't have any access to that grade. But it certainly feels like he's not out of place when you watch him in coverage. And I love a safety that can tackle. I love a safety that can tackle in the open field, because a lot of times schemes are set up for that completion, right? That shorter completion into the flat. A lot of times you're scheming something for, hey, we're going to give him that, because you got a guy that can tackle somebody in the open field. You got to have speed, explosiveness, and obviously very good football IQ. So Justin Reid, to me, this is a very, very good signing by the Saints. I gave it an A.
When you mention, the short completions that turn into big plays a lot of times, there were two plays that just jumped into my head. Number one, week 3 against Philadelphia.
Okay.
Dallas Goedert, when he catches that drag on the mesh play, and he takes it all the way up the sideline for, 60-something yards, that wound up being the difference maker in that game. And then another one, I think it was 2 years ago, when they played the Bengals in the Superdome. Jamar Chase caught a pass, and Tyrann Mathieu missed the tackle.
Yeah.
And it was a short pass, and Jamar Chase turned it into a touchdown. And those are the kind of plays that, like you mentioned, Justin Reid specializes in shutting down. And when you look at a player like Justin Reid, you could argue today he is one of your 3 best defensive players.
Period.
I mean, this isn't just a guy that you're taking from Kansas City, or, a product of a really good team. This is a really good player. Day one, he is the best player in your secondary right now. Outside of DeMario Davis, and maybe you can say Brian Brzee, he is the best player on that defense right now. And the secondary is a place that's taken some hits. We talked about it on Monday. Your cornerbacks used to be the strong suit of that secondary. You lost Marshawn Lattimore. You lost Paulson Adebo, who brought a little bit of bad with him, but Paulson Adebo made...
He was still a competent starter.
I'm about to say, he did some good things too. So now bringing in Justin Reid to shore up that secondary, a Justin Reid who, by the way, is not 32 years old. He's a young player with still a lot of football ahead of him. I think it's a great move by the Saints. It fills a need. It gives you that player next to Tyrann Mathieu that you've been looking for ever since Tyrann got here. And ironically, this is probably your biggest defensive signing since Tyrann Mathieu. So I think it's an A+ move for the Saints when it comes to, filling a need. And now you look forward to what comes next, because when it comes to acquisitions, this has been kind of a, conservative offseason for the Saints so far. The 2 acquisitions they've made being Justin Reid and Devon Godshaw. They've restructured or reworked the contracts of Eric McCoy, DeMario Davis, Derek Carr, Cesar Ruiz, Carl Granderson, Pete Werner, Colin Saunders, Tyrann Mathieu. You've re-signed Nathan Shepard. You re-sign.
No, extended Nathan
Yeah,
Shepherd.
extended Nathan Shepherd. You re-sign Chase Young. You re-sign Juwan Johnson, which got a little bit of criticism from the Who Dat Nation. You've lost players like Paulson Adebo, Jamal Williams, Peyton Turner, Will Harris. So when you look at kind of the approach that the Saints have taken to this offseason, do you agree with it, or do you wish they'd be a little more active?
Well, I was trying to come up with like kind of a theme of what it's been. What are they trying to tell us? What are they trying to tell us by these moves? And based off what you just laid out, based off the fact that they've only netted 2 guys from another roster. Now, look, we're gonna keep checking because there's going to be more. There has to be more. They're too vulnerable in certain spots. But in the hot part of free agency, right off the presses. Now you correct me if I'm wrong, and by all means y'all do the same, and I know y'all will if y'all think I'm wrong. But my main takeaway after the first few days is, frankly, the Saints truly believe that last year's squad was better than their 5-12 record. They aren't tearing it down like we've seen so many other teams do. By the way, so many other teams that have had more success than the Saints recently than the Saints. Just look at the San Francisco 49ers right now. Look at the Buffalo Bills from a season ago. Truly, I think the Saints are saying injuries and coaching were the biggest culprits of the 5-12 disaster that was last season, not the roster. That the Saints are essentially saying that's where they're going to make the sweeping changes. They're going to bring in the new coaching staff, which they did. They're going to bring in, and within that coaching staff, from what you and I were talking to a couple of people at that meet and greet, there's a whole new approach to the sports science thing. I hope that works out. Yeah. My goodness, because that could be such an equalizer for the Saints if they can somehow figure that out. But they believe the changes will be coaching staff and injuries, not wholesale changes to the roster, despite it getting quite older. And guess what? They ain't getting any younger. And they're banking on that being the difference. That's a bold approach to a team coming off a 5-12 record, to a team that has not made the playoffs in 4 straight seasons. The Saints are keeping their core together. Just look at the moves. You mentioned it. They restructured Derek Carr, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, Carl Granderson. That alone would have gotten them to salary cap compliance. That alone gets you back to zero, probably a little bit more cap space. But they kept going.
Yeah.
They restructured. The Mario Davis, frankly, it's the one move I'm scratching my head at. I don't understand why you'd restructure a guy at 35 years old, probably in the last year of his career, because obviously it costs you more money when you get to the following season, which is something that the Saints have done repeatedly. Then they went with Pete Werner, then Colin Saunders, then they extended Nathan Shepherd, according to Josina Anderson. We thought one of those D tackles would be gone.
Yeah.
Not only are both back, they traded for another one, and they still have Brian Brzee. Clearly, that's a position that they're trying to figure it out and giving themselves some best options. They also re-signed Chase Young and Juwan Johnson. Look, I'm with y'all. I thought it was a little bit of an overpay for Juwan Johnson. I don't mind him coming back. I would have went somewhere like 3 years, $24 million, 3 years, $25 million, not 3 years, $30 million. I think it's a little bit of an overpay. And also, coming off of a season where you went 5-12, injuries or not, I thought more players would have been cut. I thought more players would have been cut. We had the list. Jamal Williams topped that list. He was the first player gone. I thought there would have been more. Maybe there will be. Again, we'll keep checking. But so far, he's the only player to be released off of a 5-12 season. I thought, they had guys like, we mentioned Saunders, we mentioned Shepard, we mentioned Cedric Wilson types, DeMarco Jackson types. But so far, nope. Just one, Jamal Williams. Now, they did lose Adebo. They did lose MVS. Man, MVS signed for $5 million 1 year.
Following Clint Kubiak. He said, I like this offense. I'm going to stick with this guy.
And my point is, oh, man, that might have been worth it to keep him around.
That
might have been worth it to keep him around. Will Harris. Liked him, but look, I think they upgraded.
Yeah.
Peyton Turner, no one's going to miss him. But I think most people expected that. All in all, doesn't it have the feel of running it back? It sort of feels like running it back with pretty much the same roster, but with a whole new coaching staff. My question is, they have some significant cap space now. It's hard to tell what the exact number is because I think there's some deals that have to go through, and when it comes to actual numbers, when it comes to cap space in terms of how much space they truly have. But my question is, who else is going to spend it on? Because now they've got a fair amount of cap space. You can allot $6-7 million for your draft class, whatever you have to do with that. You still got some room to sign some other guys. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be somebody on your own roster, which they've done, or is it someone from outside? Because they do have some needs right now that are glaring right now. So that's kind of been my read on the first couple days of the Saints free agency. What about you?
It does seem like they're deciding to run it back, which does surprise me because, like you said, this was not a good football team last year. And you could argue, and I wouldn't argue with you, yes, the coaching was bad. Yes, the injuries were probably the worst injury-ridden season that I've ever seen from any football team. But at the end of the day, a lot of your problems were also coming from the fact that your roster is old, there's a lack of playmakers on your roster, and there's a lack of depth so that when those injuries happened, there weren't a lot of good players to plug in. When it comes to fixing that, it's not too late. I was looking at the free agency, and there's a lot of talented guys that are gone, but there's a lot of talented guys who are out there.
No doubt.
You talk about playmakers who can get open. Amari Cooper, a wide receiver.
Cooper Kupp just officially got released, by the way.
Right, Cooper Kupp just got released. What's that boy's name? Stephon Diggs, likely to re-sign in Houston, but he is an unrestricted free agent. Keenan Allen, another guy who is specialized in getting open. Yes, they're all a little older, but they're better than Cedric Wilson. They're better than, maybe a Marquez Valdez-Scantling, as good as he could have been in this offense. You look at an Asante Samuel, a really good young cornerback for a team that needs cornerbacks, seeing that you lost the guys who were your number one and number two.
I wonder if he's on their radar because he's got a Staley connection.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got a Brandon Staley connection.
So I'd be shocked if that conversation wasn't at least happening. You look at offensive line, you've got Cam Robinson out there. You've got a guy like Kevin Zeitler out there who he's older. He's about 35 years old, but he was really good in Detroit last year. Just like you brought in Lucas Patrick, a veteran who wound up being relied on a lot when he was healthy. Kevin Zeitler could be a guy just like that. You've got Mekhi Becton, another young offensive lineman, guys who can give you that O-line depth that you didn't necessarily have last year. I mean, they grabbed Connor McGovern off a practice squad and had to throw him straight into the lineup because that's how banged up that O-line got at points last season. You've got an Isaiah Simmons, a young linebacker who can also play a little bit of safety, a great cover guy, in that nickel or dime package. Like, that's somebody who can make your defense better today. All of these guys are still available. So, yeah, you may have missed out on some of the big guys. Now, I'm not going to say it's a lack of effort. I'm sure the Saints are trying to get them, but when you look at the state of the New Orleans Saints, it's not necessarily the most, welcoming when it comes to a free agent who maybe wants to win. They're maybe not at the top of a lot of guys' list, but there are guys who you can bring here, and there are guys who can help your team out there right now. So, yeah, it's not too late to, still make this team better.
And maybe that's part of the strategy. I mean, that's always kind of been their strategy to be the second wave team. And generally speaking, after that first rush, I mean, I'm seeing some of the numbers coming now with free agents signing today. Like, this is a special team, or 2 years, $6 million. I mean, so you're starting to see that the prices come down, and maybe that's part of the strategy. And maybe this is when you kind of sit back, let the market resettle, and then strike. Not a bad strategy. I do think they have to, not should. They have to. They must add a cornerback. Not wait for the draft. They must add a cornerback right now, or in free agency, in this wave of free agency. Whether or not that's Asante Samuel, whether that's even a guy who's been banged up his whole career, like Jeff Okuda. I forgot how he's pronounced his last name. Okuda. Yes.
Stephon Gilmore's out there.
Yeah, I mean, he's an older player, but I mean, just you got to have a body. You need a body. You need a body right now. So without Adebo and without Lattimore, obviously, you only have Kool-Aid, McKinstry, and Alontae Taylor, and we don't know exactly which way or where they're going to settle in with Alontae Taylor on the team. So that's kind of where things stand. I would expect them to add a few more players. Real quick, what do you think of the guys of their own free agents? I mean, who should be the one they prioritize next? I mean, because you've got like Willie Gay, you've got Lucas Patrick, you've got like Tano Passanio, who's been a versatile D lineman. I don't know if he's a scheme fit. Of the guys on your roster, I mean, who would you prioritize to bring back?
That's the thing. I'm not exactly rushing to bring any of them back, you know. I think all of them can help you in a way. You know, you talk about Tano's versatility. You talk about, we raved about Willie Gay's ability to stop mobile quarterbacks, and how he used that ability in Kansas City. But when we actually saw him on the field, he didn't get an opportunity to necessarily do a lot of that this past season. So, there's not a lot of guys who I'm necessarily rushing to bring back. The guys who I'm looking at are the guys who their time's not here yet. Like, eventually you're going to have to make a decision about Chris Olave. Eventually you're going to have to make a decision about a Rashid Shaheed and how long-term you see him being with this franchise. Eventually, I'm seeing how much these young defensive players are going to get paid. You're about a year or two away from having to make a Brian Brzee decision. And those are those big decisions that are going to be looming over the next few years.
Was that why they're creating cap space now?
That's what I would
Is that
expect.
what it's for? I mean, look, like you went. I thought they would restructure themselves to zero and then make a few cuts to get themselves the cap space they need.
Yeah.
But they went like I said, we calculated 16 moves if they cut Derek Carr, and it was like 9 if they didn't. And one of those was like 4 restructures. Well, they've done I think 7. On top of a pay cut for Matthew, on top of a pay cut or rework deal. It's basically converted into playing time incentives. So it's the lowest salary cap hit. We still know what's going to happen with Cam Jordan. We still don't know what's going to happen with Taysom Hill. If you're creating all this space, that's awesome, but what are you going to use it on? So we'll see. Usually they live right up against the cap. One thing they did do, and we didn't have a chance to pot on this because by the time we were done Monday, this had hit late. Chase Young did enough. He signed the 1-year prove-it deal. By the way, the 1-year prove-it deal was $12 million, right, last year?
Yeah.
5.5 sacks, good pressure rate, played in all 17 games, did good, but not great enough to hit the big money edge defender market. So the Saints bring him back on a 3-year, $51 million contract, which is lower middle class when it comes to premier edge defenders. I don't know if I would call him premier. But clearly, this is a significant signing because, he's the body type of a 4-3 guy, and now they're going to expect him to stand up and be an edge pass rusher. Clearly, they think enough of him to bring him back in the new scheme because, look, he can be a game wrecker. I wish he would finish a little more, but he is a guy that's consistently in the backfield. But if he is able to connect with this new system at rushing the passer, then the Saints just got a massive bargain at 3 years, $51 million. If it doesn't work out, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but frankly, $17 million a season at the edge pass rusher position is not a crazy amount to pay for a guy like Chase Young.
Yeah, and when I saw the deal, I thought they overpaid for not just Chase Young but Juwan Johnson as well.
Juwan, I agree.
I kind of understood Juwan because when you look at the tight end market, Juwan Johnson was probably one of the best tight ends available out there, other than maybe Evan Ingram, who recently signed with Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos.
What did he get? I'm gonna look at what did he get?
I don't know if they've even announced it. Here it is, 2-year deal with the Denver Broncos for $23 million. So he's getting
2 for $23,
$11.5
So I was about to say, okay,
per year.
Yeah.
So then I don't think Juwan Johnson's done as much as Evan Ingram has over the last few years. So I think you overpaid for Juwan. I get bringing him back just because of there's not much else out there. I think you overpaid a bit for him, but I also think you overpaid for Chase Young, and I felt like that signing was more about scheme and fit and the potential that they saw for him in a potential 3-4 system than it was about production. Because we mentioned Chase Young being a potential game wrecker. Unfortunately, I don't think there were any games he wrecked last year. There weren't any games that I can think of where I'm just like, man, Chase Young was a real difference maker in that one. Maybe the Washington game. He was good against the Commanders, but other than that, I don't think Chase Young really broke loose and was that dominant pass rusher that, he was supposed to be coming out of Ohio State and that they hoped he would be against Washington, or that the Saints hoped he would be when they brought him here. So I think the new deal is less about his production and what he did for you last year and what you hope he can do in this new system.
See, but that's where I'll go a little different, just because I'm trying to pull up the edge defender contracts right now, because I think they got a pretty middle class contract with him at 3 years, $51 million. I'd have to look. Other than the guy that's not on a rookie deal, I'm trying to check it out right now. But I don't think that was a crazy overpay. And honestly, if you slightly overpaid at edge pass rusher, I'm okay with that. as long as he's productive.
He kind of falls right in the middle. He's making a little less than the Khalil Macks, the Bradley Chubbs, what Trey Hendrickson was making. You know, he's making more than a DeMarcus Lawrence and a Hassan Reddick, and Eric Armstead, a Matthew Judon, Frankie Louvo, Jadeveon Clowney, you know, guys like that. So he's making more than, to me, I would have expected him to be more in the range of what Joey Bosa signed for. I think Joey Bosa signed a 1-year, $12 million deal.
Yeah, he's a little bit younger than Joey Bosa. He's 26 years old, and he is a little bit of a tease because it's all there, and he's just not consistently dominant. Doesn't wreck games as much as you think. But I didn't have as much of a problem with this one. But I thought, because that edge pass rusher market's always going to be a little inflated. But the Juwan Johnson one, to me, like, I don't know what his market was on the open market. I love Juwan. He's a great guy to deal with. I just thought it would have been something like 3 years 24, 3 years 25, as opposed to 3 years 30. He wasn't a terrible player last year. In fact, he had one of the best season of his career.
Career highs in receptions and yards.
And yards. So I think it was ultimately an okay signing. It just felt like it was overpaying a little bit. The team still needs a corner. They still need a wide receiver. And I'm still very, very curious because they've still got a lot of moves to be made over here in the next. I mean, free agency's here now, so now they can make whatever moves they want to make.
Right, you know, and when you look forward to the draft, I was thinking Ashton Jeanty. You might have to think of Will Johnson or, one of the cornerbacks that are out there. But even still, you don't want to rely on that guy too much because you wound up having to rely on Kool-Aid McKinstry a lot last season, and he didn't necessarily step up and live up to what
he
you
won't have to start this year.
He better step up now. It's now or never.
By the way, the actual number as we get out of here, according to Spotrac, average in the year per year, Chase Young is 19th in the NFL. I don't know. I mean, is he the 19th best pass rush in the NFL?
Yeah,
I think he's got the potential to be higher. But anyway, we got to get out of here. So for Andre Johnson Jr., I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.